Joel Imhof interviews John Dinsmore for Megabooks.
This is Joel Imhof. I'm sitting here in a beautiful bookstore on a lovely summer day in Prague. We're here today with John Dinsmore, the author of the new book, The Marketing of Debt, How They Get You, from Emerald Publishing. Hello.
Hello. Thanks for having me.
You're a professor of marketing at Wright State University in Dayton, Ohio.
Mm-hmm.
And you've worked in the field of marketing for some years. You've written a number of peer-reviewed articles and case studies, but this is your first book.
Yes. I felt like professors should write books. I had to figure out what book to write, and a lot of what I do at Wright State is teaching digital marketing, but the material for that, if I was going to write about that, by the time it would be in print, it would already be out of date. Or I would just spend the rest of my life updating that book, which didn't sound like a lot of fun. So one of my streams of research is about money and how people react to money and that sort of thing. So focusing on that led me to the topic of why do people misunderstand debt and what are the common mistakes that they make. And I decided that was something that I could write and hopefully, would kind of always be current and relevant.
I saw some of the articles that you've written, and a lot of them have to do with mobile marketing. Does that dovetail quite well with the concepts that are discussed here, or are they very separate?
No, there's some overlap. I mean, you're going to see, so psychology, I mean, this is not a pure psychology book, but psychology enters into each of the chapters. And as we do everything on our phones now, it certainly comes in play. So one of the chapters is about mental accounting. We all experience some level of pain or discomfort when we part with money. What type of currency we're using, whether it's cash or credit or whatever, we experience that differently. And as you might expect, if you're paying with credit for something, it's a little less painful. You feel like you can spend a little more freely, even though you're spending the same amount of money.
Maybe even more.
Well, and more likely, right? If you're spending cash, you're constantly hit with these reminders of it's not just parting with the cash, you're tallying the cash in your head, and you might have to go out and get more cash, which is going to make things more unpleasant for you. Spending on credit is easier, and there's a recent study that came out showing that when you're paying with your phone, it's not only not painful, you experience feelings of pleasure doing it, which is kind of scary in terms of your financial well-being. And I say this, and I've been in Prague for a few weeks, and I'm paying almost everything with my phone, but it's just so convenient. But so yeah, there's definitely overlaps in terms of mobile marketing, and because we're using the mobile platform for a lot of our financial transactions.
Professor Dinsmore, what is one of your worst financial decisions, and what would today John say to then John?
Right. It's easy for me to think. I mean, I've made plenty of bad financial decisions in my life, but the thing, probably the most costly one was, so I'm not sure, I would imagine there's a lot of similarities when you're buying a house here in the Czech Republic as there are in the United States, right? You're looking at houses forever because for most people, it's the most important purchase they make in their lives. You're looking at lots of houses and you finally commit to one, and then you have to go through the process of trying to get a loan. And in the United States, I don't know what the timeline here, but in the US, it's 30 to 60 days from the point where you commit to the point where the house actually becomes yours. And you have to do all these things, including getting the loan. I had been working for a real estate company, and this was the first house that my, then fiance, now wife, Alyssa, and I were buying together. So the head of the real estate company said, I have a friend who's a mortgage guy, and you should really use him. That's fine, thinking that there's not much difference. And I don't think he was necessarily the most honest guy. We committed to the house. We'll just say Steve, which was actually his first name. So Steve gets everything worked up. Here's your loan. It's going to be fine once you get through all these things. About a week before we're supposed to, we call it closing in the United States, I'm not sure, but before the sale is supposed to become final, he calls up and says there's a problem. For these different reasons, the good interest rate and loan package that we thought you qualified for, you don't qualify for. We can try some other things, but it is going to be more expensive. Psychologists call it escalating commitment, right? That the further down the path you go. And so we were a week away from, I think I was living with my parents and I get along with my parents. It wasn't, but you don't want to live with them forever. And so we ended up saying, yeah, we'll take the bad loan package, which was horrifically expensive when really, not to get philosophical here, in finance or in life, there's lots of times where you feel like you have no choices, but you always have choices. It's just some of them are scary or difficult.
So what would you say?
I would say that even a week away from closing, I should have shopped around and called his bluff. Flash forward, my wife and I have been married 19 years. We refinanced a different house and had a similar experience with the guy who was arranging the refinancing. And the hardest learned lessons are always pretty fresh in your minds. He came back, said, well, there's a problem, but don't worry, it's just going to cost you a couple $1,000s. And I was like, well, that's a lot of money, And so we just cut him off and shopped around and found a better deal and all of that.
How painful was that new process after you cut him off?
You still have some amount of uncertainty in doing it, but I think, if you're ever bullied as a kid, you never forget it, right? And I think if you're ever bullied by a mortgage broker, similarly, you never forget it. You immediately get your back up and just say, I'm not going down this road with this person. And while you are somewhat uncertain about it, it actually turns out to be the right decision.
So you have an introduction from Jason Harris.
Yes.
How did you become friends with Jason Harris, and how has he influenced you, if at all?
Jason is a fraternity brother of mine.
Mm-hmm.
And we had kept somewhat in touch since college. And whenever he was based out of San Francisco for a while, and, life took me out there, I would usually cross paths with him. And then he had left. He was with, I want to say, Chat Day, one of the big ad agencies. Mm-hmm. And then he left to start his own agency called Mechanism.
Yeah.
And it very quickly became a very big deal. It was him and two friends, and then all of a sudden they had multiple offices and were doing Super Bowl commercials and that sort of thing. Mm-hmm. And you'll see, for whatever reason, Jason's just a super nice guy, and anytime I've asked him for anything, he's just always said yes.
That's probably a lot of his success is just saying yes to everything.
I think so. Well, he has a book out that's called The Art of Persuasion, The Soulful Art of Persuasion. Right. And a lot of it really is that, nice guys essentially can finish first, or at least do well. And for his business, which is a big relationship business, I mean, if you met him, he's hilariously funny. He is super charming. He's one of those people where he walks into a room, he's probably the most important person in the room, but he makes everyone else in the room feel like they're the most important person in the room. But he was, he's just always been insanely nice to me.
That's great.
And I've always been fascinated by, because he really had what I would say is the first, they're now a general ad agency, full service ad agency, and they got bought by Omnicom or one of the big
I saw that.
His was the first agency that really specialized in creating viral videos, and that's kind of how they got their start.
Yeah.
And then they just blew up from there.
It's nice.
Yeah.
So when writing this book, sir, Professor Dinsmore, how do you think you managed to strike the right mix of earnest, informative, helpful insights, and sometimes very funny irreverence? I even had to read the footnotes a couple times. This book is definitely not like academic writing. So how did you manage to strike this tone or land on this tone?
It's a funny thing writing the book, because I don't like a lot of academic books because they're not, a lot of times it feels like they're not written to be read.
Yeah.
They're written to kind of prove how smart the author is or how much they know.
Well, it's not even that sometimes. Maybe it's written because in order for it to be published, the people who are looking at it have to say it has to have all this crazy stuff in it.
Right.
I don't think it's always like the author trying to say, look at me. It's the author saying, look at what I can write because I know that's what you want me to write. But it's not great for people reading it.
Right. Yeah, and it may be more that. But whatever the motivation, I think the end result a lot of times is a book that's, you're not going to curl up on the beach with this book. So I wanted to... Initially, I didn't want it to come out of an academic press, but I thought if I was going to wanted to write something that people would actually read and hopefully take from it. Mm-hmm. And I actually started, sorry, Emerald Publishing, if you're listening to this, I started trying to get commercial presses and agents. And if I heard anything, it was a form rejection. Usually I would hear nothing. And then one agent wrote me and said, here's why your book's never going to get published on a commercial press. And it was actually really, really helpful. So he had said, look, unless you have a following or some amount of notoriety, they're not going to take a chance on you for this kind of a book. So if you have a social media following of 100,000 or more, keep trying for a commercial press. But you're a professor, academic presses are going to be more open to you. But I had written this book that wasn't an academic book. The good people at Emerald liked it and decided to take a chance on it, but even they were like, it's not really an academic book. A lot of times, whether we know it or not, we end up where we're supposed to be. And so I think maybe Emerald has been the right place. They've been extraordinarily nice for this book that other people, or at least other academic presses, thought this is too
pop psychology.
Yeah, it's not smart enough, I think.
So how close are you to your 100,000 followers?
Not close at all. Even though I teach classes about social media and digital marketing, I know what to do to build a following, but it's a full-time job. I have a few thousand followers, and I'm grateful for them, but I'm also not going to start making videos of me opening gift packages or, the stuff my kids watch, or having reaction videos to other things.
I think the irony of learning about how digital marketing works is you realize, I don't know if it's an irony, but you realize what you don't want to be doing with your life in service of digital marketing, which you would have to do.
A lot of influencers are very unhappy doing it, but they're making lots of money. But if you think about, okay, there's a lot of simple things in our life that we take for granted. But I think if you're an influencer, you might think, okay, I'm going to the grocery store. How can I turn this into content?
Right.
And all of a sudden I just want to get to the grocery store and back, right?
Which is probably really fun for a while.
It probably is, and probably thrilling when it's working. And financially, certainly it can work out. Hugely competitive, though. And so much of generating a social media following is posting so frequently. So you think about having to have multiple interesting pieces of content every day, and it's daunting.
If you were going to start unboxing, what would you unbox?
What would I Wow, that's great. I guess my publisher would say, I want me to say this book, but I would say, what would I unbox that would...
I think I have a guess.
Well, I mention in the dedication of the book that I'm a drummer, so I'm always, and as my wife will tell you, I don't like to shop, but yet I can just sit in a music store and just, stare at music gear all day. So it would probably be that.
That was going to be my guess, yeah. Mitch Hedberg.
Oh, yeah.
Alex Huxley, Smokey Robinson, Foo Fighters, Neil Peart, of course. Yeah. That guy, Sokrates. And my favorite, Frank Herbert. You even say fear is the mind killer. I trot that out at least once a semester for my students and for my daughter.
Is it usually in the same, what do you apply it towards?
To a lot of times with the students, they have to do something that there's ambiguity in the step they're going to take next, because I teach design thinking. Right. And so in the ambiguity of it all, a lot of students are like, no, please tell me what to do. And they just sit there and don't do anything. And then, of course, fear is the mind killer. Right. And try to push them forward. And my daughter, just because I know it annoys her. But all these people you quoted in your book.
Yes.
Speak about that. Why them?
It's more just when you start writing about a specific thing. So if you look at a lot of the research articles that I published, I usually start with a quote as some sort of, I would say, pop culture quote, although I guess Socrates doesn't count as pop culture.
It's basically pop culture now, a lot of Socrates.
Right. I mean, it's so well, established. So I usually do that as just kind of a point of entry to it's kind of an intro to, this is the general idea that you're going to be dealing with for this chapter or this paper.
But also I noticed a lot of musicians in here too.
Sure.
So it's also coming from...
I am a lyrics geek, of course, yes.
You point out that people don't understand their expenses, and this is connected to both resource slack and expense prediction bias.
Yes.
Can you explain how these two concepts warp our sense of the future, and then how do marketers take advantage of that?
Okay. Resource slack is a notion that some marketing professors had come up with and researched. And the general idea is that we always think we're going to have more time, money, and energy in the future than we have today. And that really comes into play if you're dealing with something like taking out a loan or a credit card or something like that, maybe buying a car and you're going to have payments. we always think that, well, obviously a year or 5 years from now, I'm going to be making a lot more money than I am today. And it doesn't always work out that way, right? Sometimes you get passed over for a promotion, of maybe the company you're working for closes and you have to take a job at lesser pay, or, I mean, these things all happen.
Maybe Lehman Brothers closes down.
Right. I mean, I've certainly had those experiences in my life, and yet we have this resource slack is really just kind of a form of optimism, right? We always think just things are going to be getting better for us, even though we know that sometimes there's good surprises out there for us, but occasionally bad surprises too. But because we have this optimism and belief that we're always going to have more resources in the future than we have today, we have a tendency to buy more or finance more based on what we think we'll have in the future rather than what we have today. And that gets people in a lot of trouble.
Can I interrupt you? Because what you said just reminds me of what's happening today. Because I do a lot of research and I teach a lot about consumer behavior.
Yeah.
And consumer behavior is changing based on a lot of trends as well. But one of the trends is the kind of treat yourself. You deserve this right now.
Right. Self-care and all of that, but in consumerism.
And I'm sure that plays very much into the concept of resource slack.
Right. Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think there's probably some, well, I deserve this, or I work really hard, and, as all of these things. I mean, I think that plays into it as well. I mean, certainly our desires or maybe some impulsiveness factors into our finances. And then I think you could probably rationalize those impulsive acts by saying, well, I'm going to get a raise next year. I'm sure of it. Right.
So did you want to talk about expense prediction?
Oh, yeah. So expense prediction bias, it's been shown that people have an ability to remember the regular expenses. So these are things like your rent or mortgage and your water bill and these things that happen every year, every month at the same time for the same amount of money. But we also have a lot of irregular expenses like car repairs or medical bills or things like that.
Kids going to camp.
Yeah, I mean, kids, it's just nothing but irregular expenses for sure. And we have irregular expenses every month, but they're not at the same time every month, and they're not for the same amounts. So we tend to, when we're trying to think about what monthly expenses are, we completely disregard the irregular expenses, which are frequent and significant, and only remember the regular expenses that are, same time of the month for the same amount of money. So this causes us to drastically underestimate our expenses.
So do you, when you estimate your expenses monthly or quarterly, do you put in a cushion there, just like a random cushion of, well, the last 6 months I spent this much beyond my regular expenses? Or do you just kind of know?
Do I just kind of know? I don't just kind of know, especially with kids, right? Because it's just more people and more expenses. So do I have special procedures for it? I mean, for me, I think I know I need a certain amount buffer in the account just because it's especially having written this book, maybe I should be more scientific about it, but it's more a general sense of paranoia of, I'm sure there's something I've forgotten, so I want to make sure that we have at least this much in the account.
Yeah.
Because things come in and it's just, there's too many things to keep full track of. So I think just acknowledging the inability and making allowances for that is the way to go about it.
You worked in marketing and you teach it at a university level, yet you still decided to put marketers front and center as the bad guys, at least by the title of the book.
Sure.
Does that mean you have an ambivalent or even maybe adversarial relationship with marketing as a profession?
Jason, I think, really addresses this in the foreword of the book, which is, it's a profession that has a bad reputation and in many cases well-earned, but it is also a discipline that can be used for good and can be used artfully to help create things that people will enjoy and will enhance their lives. But I think when you're in the profession, and probably most people are like this with whatever profession they're in, they have a sense of there are good operators and bad operators. And probably if it's your profession, you're even more frustrated by the bad operators than the people outside of it. So I think that's how I got to it.
I really like how you break down the complex economic and psychological concepts by giving relatively straightforward examples of how we experience them in everyday purchase situations like shoes or airline tickets before applying them to the scary topic of debt. How'd you end up choosing that storytelling structure?
I think just from teaching, right? I mean, I would imagine you do similar things, which is the more you can tie something, a complex idea, into something that your students are experiencing in their lives, they're experiencing it, make it relevant to them, then that kind of opens the gateway to getting them more comfortably to more complex things.
It definitely makes reading the book easier because you kind of ease people into the concept of all these different debt compounds.
Right. Compound interest is really all the interest that's out there, but people tend to think of flat interest rate, which is, so if I borrow $100 at 6%, I'm going to pay $6 of interest. And it's like, no, over a long period of time, you're probably hundreds or thousands of dollars worth of interest.
Yeah, exactly. One of your most interesting insights, at least to me, is about simplicity. We're always craving it, and marketers have become better and better at delivering it and understanding that if they give that to the customers, they will please the customers, they'll bring more loyalty or more profit. But when it comes to financial services relating to debt,
good marketing typically is about simplicity, where you want to put a spotlight on something and get people to embrace it. You make it as simple as possible. But if there's something that you want to obscure, well, then you make it complex as possible. And the financial services industry seems to really strive for complexity. In a lot of cases, it's because they don't want people to, some of the bad actors don't want people to understand what they're really getting into. So the more complex you can make something, the less of a chance someone has of really understanding what they're getting into.
This is an example of marketers getting a bad name, probably for a good reason. Right. But it's not just the marketers doing this, right?
Sure. I mean, I think when you're looking at some big banks, or they have the data to be able to tell if people are making good purchases that they can afford. So they have the data to be able to know if they're providing a good deal to their customers, right? Or if they're just really maximizing every last dollar they can make off of them.
And then they get to choose whether to use that data or not.
We need to go to college, buy houses, buy cars, and there are some good actors out there, but there's some not so nice actors out there.
What are zombie loans?
Zombie loans. Okay, so zombie loans, I originally, it's funny when you write a book, there's a lot of isolation, and sometimes you just come up with goofy ideas. Originally, I had called them chud loans off of, I don't know if you're familiar with the old cannibalistic humanoid underground dwellers movie. I went to zombies just because I thought it was more. So these are loans that typically are targeted at people with lower incomes, a lot of times with less financial experience. And so if you go in the United States, into poor neighborhoods, there typically are no banks. There's no access to market rate financial services. So people are forced to do things like go to what they call check cashing businesses. Yeah. I don't know if you have those over here.
Not really.
But so someone without a bank account will go to this place and they will cash the check. But if it's let's say $1,000 check, the check cashing place is probably going to take $60 or $70 of that just for the privilege of cashing the check. And these are to people who are the least able to afford them, right?
Yeah.
There are other businesses like that. So I refer to those as zombie loans because there's really no redeeming features of them. And they're typically designed at exploiting people who can least afford to be exploited. Once you tap into these services, it makes it more and more likely that you're going to tap into them again and again. And it's just draining you of your financial life.
I liked one of the suggestions you had at the end of the book about zombie loans, about making banking facilities available at places because maybe banks don't see the value in moving into poor neighborhoods from a commercial point of view, but making banks available in places in poor neighborhoods like the DMV or like the post office.
This is being done, I forget which, there are at least some European countries that...
Italy has done that. Italy completely changed their postal service around, which was terrible. And it was losing a lot of money. And they made it basically into a financial services organization.
They have all the assets in place to be able to handle those types of things. And post offices and DMVs, they're in every community, every neighborhood, regardless of income. So it makes it, one of the studies that I cite in there is, and this is pretty recently done, in you can donate your plasma and get paid for it. And an economist did a study showing that in poor neighborhoods, if there was a plasma collection center that would pay people for their blood, it reduced use of check cashing stores by something like 15%. So the people who live in these neighborhoods, they know that these businesses are predatory, but they just can't avoid it because there are no other options. So if you can create some options for these folks, they really have a much better chance of, improving their lives.
That's great. Done my fair share of plasma donation in college. It's like you don't have to work at all. You just sit there, read a book, get some beer money. Can you explain the relationship between prestige credit cards and spending habits? People need to hear this.
Okay, yeah. So you'll see lots of credit cards out that will be diamond, platinum, and have all of these kind of luxury branding to them. And it goes back to the American Express card back in the 50s. I think they introduced the gold card. And it was a credit card designed specifically for people of higher incomes. Like you had to have really good credit and really good incomes. And it immediately became the status symbol. And it wasn't too long after that it became something that was so desired that even credit cards targeting people with bad credit or little income started being branded platinum, diamond, and whatever. And what studies have shown is that people of lower means who desire status, right? And wealth is a big part of what status is, that if people with lower means had these kind of status branded cards, they tended to spend more as a means of exhibiting status, flashing their platinum card in front of their friends and that sort of thing.
And more than they should be spending.
More than they should be spending, versus if they had just a plain credit card, they wouldn't have been spending as much.
Because when you pull out a plain credit card, you're not displaying your alphaness at all.
Right. You're not, it's not a flex, right? So much. But if it's a platinum card or gold or something like that, it is. And so people lacking status would do it more as a way of trying to exhibit their status. And in the meantime, getting themselves deeper in debt.
At the end of your book, you have a chapter on things we can do to try to combat the way these organizations mislead us. What one piece of advice would you give a listener regarding each of these topics? Taking out loans, taking out a mortgage, and using credit cards.
Probably the same for each, which is take your time. I think get help. Sorry, it's more than one piece of advice, but take your time. Don't move forward if you're not confident in what you're doing.
Even if there's a timeline that you're up against?
A lot of timelines are artificial that a marketer will do to say, well, we've really got to. It's like if you're buying a car and they're like, well, I can only give you this deal today because it's, oh, come on. Like if you came back tomorrow, they would give you the deal. They want to sell the car. But I think because finance and math makes us so anxious because we're so afraid of making a mistake, a lot of times we don't feel like we have the power or the time to take a step back. And
we could possibly lose everything if that's what we feel, right?
And that could be what a salesperson is telling you also, right? Well, you're not going to get this house closed if we don't do it this way. But you always have options. And I think that take as much time as you can and shop around as much as you can on any of these things.
And with credit cards?
The same thing with credit cards. I mean, with credit cards, I would say there's a whole chapter about don't get caught up on incentives like travel miles and things like that, because usually they're just a distraction from the actual cost. I mean, it's a joke. 1% to 2% of all of the debt you accrue will then go towards travel, but you're probably paying a higher interest rate, so you're probably better off just having a lower interest card and not worrying about the miles.
Well, thank you very much, sir.
All right, thanks,
I've enjoyed this conversation with you, and I do hope that your book is popular among academics and non-academics.
Well, thanks, Joel.
And good luck on getting that following up to 100,000.
Thanks.